check ทดสอบทดสอบทดสอบทดสอบเช็คเช็คเช็คเช็คเช็คเช็คเช็คทดสอบเช็คเช็คเช็คทดสอบเช็ค one two one one เช็คเช็คเช็คเช็คทดสอบทดสอบทดสอบ test one two twoแดดเป็นร้องขอให้ลองร้องครับไหนครับอันนี้เขาเรียกครับไอ้บ้านของเดวิดอยู่ที่ไหนครับตอนนี้ไอ้เหรออยู่ที่ไอ้แดงครับเริ่มจากถ่ายรูปไปเลยครับครับผมที่ไอ้แดงครับโอเคครับลองเดินดูมันใจตัวเดียวมันน่าจะใครนี่ตัวไหนได้ไรสายจะต้องกบเองแก้กันชิคสายกันชิคดีพี่เอาเนาะชิค
So, is that good? Oh, I don't have anywhere to clip it. See, that's the. I don't have a belt. I'll hold it. Thank you. Yeah, I guess. Okay, that's fine.
Maybe when I said 8, they thought, come at 8, we'll start, But there are snacks and coffee, so.
Okay, I'm good. right? Everything's right, yep. Hello.
Just let you know the on-off button here, this one.
Okay.
Yeah, this is on or this is on.
Yep.
But if you don't want the voice,
Oh, okay. I think it's okay because we're going to.
It's too heavy to.
Yeah, I don't have anywhere to clip it unless you want to put it at the back.
Sure.
Like on the back of my dress.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
I would help you to put the button first. You don't have to put the button.
A what? Oh. Yeah, that comes in.
It's tiny.
Yes.
It's tiny button. But this will be always on.
That's all right. Okay, thank you. Yes.
Kelly Walter, Dean of Admissions, Boston University.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes. Yep.
Saying that
Okay.
I'm going to hand it over.
That's all right.
Good morning. Hello. Excuse me. I see I'm not a classroom teacher. I don't know how to get your attention. Oh, is that what I'm supposed to do? Yeah. There we go. Okay. Thank you, the teachers in the back, for prompting me there. I'm Carrie Trammell. I'm the high school counselor, new this year to CMIS. It's nice to see so many of you. Just makes me feel good that you're so committed to your kids and want to get this great information. We have Kelly Walter here. She is the Dean of Admissions, Boston University, so she's come a long ways and she's going to have some great information for us, so I am just going to pass it off to her.
Thank you, Carrie. I'm all set. Thank you and good morning. As Carrie said, I work currently at Boston University, but I'm not wearing my Boston University hat today. I'm here as part of a very special program called the Overseas Schools Project. This is a grant that is funded in part by the U.S. State Department and the College Board, and it sends people like me, chief enrollment and admissions officers from the United States, to visit schools like yours and help families understand a little bit more about the admissions process in the United States. So I've been doing this for several years. I've done a lot of travel through the Middle East as part of this project, and this is my first foray into Southeast Asia, and I'm really thrilled to be here with all of you today. So thank you for the invitation. We're going to spend the time together talking about, hopefully, as you can see, demystifying the admissions process, and in particular, I'm going to focus on selective college admissions. I suspect all of you, being at a school like CMIS, that you're really committed to the education of your children, that you have reasonably high expectations for what they will achieve and accomplish both in school and in life. So I want to talk about those kinds of institutions for which admissions is relatively competitive. Before I begin, however, I'd like to get a sense from all of you what year your children are. Some of you may be starting really early, but how many of you, I'm assuming you all have students in the high school, is that correct? No. Okay, I'm seeing some no's. But most of you, go ahead. Those of you that have children in the high school, raise your hands. Okay. Does anyone have a senior right now? Okay, good. Senior, you have a senior. Okay. So they're in the midst of this process already. But rest of you, they're 9th, 10th, and grade 11 students. And I saw, sir, you have younger children? 8th grade. Okay, so they'll be in the high school very soon. So I'm going to try to give you context about the process. I will certainly use my experience at Boton Univerisy for examples. I also worked at Wellesley College in my career. So I've worked at a research university that is relatively large, but I've also worked at a small liberal arts college. So I'll use both of those as my frame of reference, but I'm going to talk about the totality of higher education in the United States. And by the way, anyone should stop me at any point. I'm hoping we can really have a conversation more than just having me speak to you, lecture to you. So if you have a question, raise your hand and I can take it along the way. So I'd like to begin, yes, you're laughing. I like to begin with this slide because I think for a lot of families, and especially for those of you who have never been to the United States, you're not familiar with the higher education system in the United States, and for those of you that are U.S. passport holders, you may not have lived back in the U.S. for many, many years. So when you begin thinking about the college process, it's completely understandable why it feels a little overwhelming. And for a lot of families, it feels like this maze that you have to navigate, right? And there's a lot of twists and turns along the way. You should expect that. This is not a straight and narrow path, but rest assured there are people along the way that will help you, your teachers, your counselors, those of us that are admissions officers at colleges in the U.S. We are available to help guide you, so you are not alone. So hopefully that's reassuring. So as you're thinking about higher education for your children, it's no wonder that it feels overwhelming, right? Because of the number of institutions from which they can choose. If you look globally, there are nearly 24,000 colleges and universities in the world. And if you focus just on the United States, which is what I'm going to be talking about today, there are 3,700 institutions. Those include both 2- and 4-year colleges. I'm guessing most of you are going to be focused on 4-year colleges and universities, institutions that offer bachelor's degrees, and I will talk about the different kinds of institutions, but 4-year colleges, there are about 2,200. So even narrowing it down to that number, that's a lot of institutions to research and figure out which college might be a good fit for your son or your daughter. So there's a couple of things that I want to talk about as you begin this process of selecting a college. And I always think it's important to understand the difference between perception and reality, the difference between fact and fiction. For a lot of students, again, if they haven't spent time in the United States in recent years, what they know about colleges and universities is probably what they hear. And they can hear it from a neighbor, they can hear it from a friend, they can hear it from an uncle 2 times removed, they can hear it from the internet, of course, Facebook, social media. But it doesn't mean that what they're hearing is accurate. So the more that you can be involved with your children during this process and making sure that they're asking good questions and researching the information they need about the colleges, the better the outcome of their search will be. Let me give you an example. So students come up to me all the time and they'll say, oh, Miss Walter, I really love the idea of being in college in Boston. It's a great city. I'm looking at a number of institutions in your area, but I think Boton University is too large for me. I don't want to be in a place where all the lectures are 500 students. And I say, but that's not Boton University. Where did you get that idea? Well, they just assumed, they cooked that up in their head, that because we enroll 16,000 undergraduates, that all of our classes must be mammoth. And that just couldn't be farther from the truth. At my university, the average class size is only 27. The student to faculty ratio is 10 to 1. That tells the story about my university and how committed we are to undergraduate education. But you have to do your research to find that out. So you can see that as an example, the difference between what you might hear and what you know to be true. So you have to wrap your heads around doing that research and separating fact from fiction. So the other really important piece of advice I'd like to offer you is a semantic one. But as you approach your college search with your children, often what I hear families say is, I want my child to go to the best school, right? I mean, that makes sense. You want your child to have a very positive experience. But there's a difference between best school and right fit. So the difference is, it really is semantics, but it has a tremendous impact on how you approach your college search. So when you say best, you are assuming that there is only one institution, one, that will meet all the needs, all the goals and aspirations for your children. I don't buy that. Not when there are 2,200 colleges and universities in the United States. I just don't buy it. And you know, in the US, right or wrong, we live in a world where we like to rank everything. You know, if you're going out to buy a car, you go to Consumer Reports and you look at the rankings. If you're buying a new refrigerator, you also go to Consumer Reports and you see which ones are ranked highly. And that makes sense, right? You're purchasing a commodity. But I don't put education in the same bucket. It is an investment in the future of your child, but it is not a commodity. It is something that will clearly add value to their life. It will be the stepping stone for the entirety of their career. You want them to have a phenomenal education, but I don't think best has to drive that conversation. And so we are a little obsessed with rankings. What I would say to all of you as parents, because I know you want a positive outcome for your child, if you're going to use the rankings, use them judiciously. And what I mean is take the data points from the rankings. So if you go to US News and World Report, and you are looking at Boton Univerisy and NYU and Tufts, I've just picked 3 colleges and universities. You can look at US News and World Report and you can find out what our selectivity is in one place. You can find out what our student to faculty ratio is in one place. You can find out what our alumni giving rate is, if that's important to you, in one place. You can find out what our tuition is in one place. Those are really important data points. But the ranking is not what matters, because I would challenge any one of you to tell me what the difference is between a school that's ranked 25 and a school that's ranked 33. Those differences are negligible. And the reality is your child is going to have a phenomenal education at any one of those institutions. I am a firm believer in it's far more important what your child puts into their academic experience than the ranking of the institution. And you see those headlines all the time. CEOs that did not go to Ivy League institutions. So as you approach the search, it's about finding that right fit as opposed to the best college or university. So how do you go about beginning this selection process? How do your children begin to do the research? They have to do a self-assessment, which I think they will do as part of the college counseling curriculum. They have to tap into who they are, what some of their goals might be, and the kinds of characteristics that they might expect to find at a college or university that would be a good fit for them. So these are some of the college characteristics that you should be thinking about. So the type of institution is a really important first question. So what do I mean by type of institution? Are they looking at a research university? Research universities tend to be larger. They have both undergraduate and graduate degree programs. So they will have 18-year-olds on their campus, but they will also probably have 30-year-olds on their campus. They do tend to be larger, but they also have resources that come with major research universities. They have infrastructure, facilities. They're the institutions that have Nobel laureates teaching classes. So you get a kind of experience at a research university that may be very different from a liberal arts college. Liberal arts colleges tend to be smaller. Wellesley was a good example of a liberal arts college. We had only 2,000 students, so vastly different from Boston University, which is 16,000 students. But Wellesley only offered a bachelor's degree. So they need to think about what kind of experience they're going to have, large, small, whether they want to be also surrounded by graduate students, and decide which of those environments might be a good fit for them. Along with that goes size, and pretty much they are very closely aligned. A liberal arts college is generally always going to be small. It just is. So if your child is someone who really thrives in a smaller environment, this is a smaller environment here, that they're really comfortable in classes that are 8 and 10 students as opposed to 25 and 30. These are questions that they need to answer in order to figure out what institutions will be a good fit for them. You know, for a lot of students, you know, at least when I think about selective college admissions, these are students who are bright, they're talented, they're ambitious, and the reason they're drawn often to universities is because they know there will be an opportunity to maybe combine undergraduate study with graduate study. Many of us offer combined degree programs, bachelor's degrees and master's degrees that can be completed in 4 years. So that's very appealing to some people, which is why research universities often become a goal for many students to think about. But you have to balance that, size versus type of institution. Location. You live in Thailand. Chiang Mai is a smaller city. It's not as big as Bangkok, but it is a city. And so what is the experience that your child has had living here? Do they like having access to a city? Do they like the energy and the hustle and bustle that goes along with a metropolitan area? If so, they're probably going to look at universities that are located in urban locations. But if they like the idea of tranquility and a more peaceful academic environment, maybe more rural, the mountains that you have surrounding you here in Chiang Mai, you have to think about that location, because if a student's uncomfortable, that institution is probably not going to be a right fit. So where a school is located matters. And along with that, believe it or not, as trite as it sounds, is weather. You know, I loved it. I landed in Bangkok last Wednesday, very late at night, and I checked into my hotel. It was about midnight, and the young woman who had greeted me, she very kindly said, "We're so very sorry that it's the cold season here." Well, I just left Boston. It was 40 degrees. I was like, I'm loving this. It's not cold. But it's a reminder that your children are used to, you know, if they're used to tropical climates, warmer weather, the shock of 4 seasons in the northeastern part of the United States might be a lot for them. So there's a reality check that you have to think about. What would it be like if I went to a place in Boston or New York and I had to wear boots and a big puffy coat, not when it was 80, but when it was 40 degrees or colder. So these things are also part of the college search. Campus environment. Campus environment can mean a lot of things. I think most importantly, it begins with whether or not a school is a residential community. Most colleges and universities in the U.S. that you'll be considering offer housing for students, a place where they can live. But not all colleges and universities guarantee housing for 4 years. I would imagine for all of you, a guarantee of housing is vitally important. You're sending your children thousands of miles away from home. You will not see them for months on end. I would think it could be a worry if all of a sudden in their sophomore year, they have to fend for themselves and find somewhere to live. So as parents, as you talk with your children about this process, thinking about what kind of residential community exists is really important. I wish I could tell you that all colleges in the U.S. do guarantee housing for 4 years, but not everyone does. So I think that would be a priority. What's also interesting for all of you, and we hear this especially from our international students, but even from our expat families, sometimes they want a campus that actually guarantees housing year-round. If you want your child to remain in the United States on their campus, is there a way that they can do that? And I think institutions that do that, mine does, it demonstrates a real commitment and understanding to students who are coming to your campus from around the world. So that's another consideration. Yes?
Most of these universities require a freshman class to live on campus.
So I think, yes. So the question is about freshmen, and do most colleges guarantee or require students to live on campus? Yes, I think the vast majority of us do. I think that idea of being a residential community, of living and studying and working together as a cohort is really a positive experience. I think the only exception would be a student that would be choosing a 2-year, perhaps community college or junior college in the U.S., for which housing is rarely available. But I think you'll find in most institutions that freshman year housing is required. After that, it varies pretty widely, okay? So that's part of what campus environment is. But campus environment can mean other things. How global or international is a university? If you have a child who's from Japan, or a child from Brazil, or a child from Thailand, are they going to be the only students from that country on the campus? How global, how international is the community? What resources do they have for students? I have found in my travels overseas that, especially for families that are in communities like yours, they want to be in a place where there are other students who have moved and lived around the world, that speak multiple languages, that have lived in 2 and 3 and 4 different places in their lives. And it doesn't matter what nationality they are, they're just citizens of the world, and that's part of who the community is. And so I think that's an important consideration for campus environment. It also can mean politics. Is this campus a liberal campus? Is it very conservative? Is it religious? You want to get a sense of those aspects of a community so that your son or your daughter will feel comfortable. I'm going to skip over competition for admission because we're going to get to that in a second. But of course, majors. Majors matter. And I'll share a great story with you. I met a young woman several years ago when she was looking at colleges. She was a top student. She was going to be valedictorian at her school. So she was looking at some pretty elite and prestigious institutions in the U.S., but she had a very specific area of study, and that was archaeology. Archaeology is not a common major at the undergraduate level in the U.S. In fact, it's offered at really a very small number of institutions. There are lots of places that offer some courses in archaeology, but a full-fledged department, not many. So she had narrowed her focus to those institutions. Boston University was one of them. However, she came from a family where she was a 4th-generation legacy to Penn. So Ivy League institution, a lot of pressure from her family. There goes that rankings thing, right? To apply to Penn and to continue with the family tradition. So Elizabeth is her name. She applied to about 8 colleges and universities. She was admitted to them all because she really is brilliant. And despite the fact that she really wanted to come to BU, because our archaeology department is deemed one of the best in the country, she went to Penn. I got an email from her in late October of her freshman year. She was miserable, miserable. She didn't have access to the courses she wanted. The archaeology courses were just that. It wasn't a department. She knew she couldn't go very deep in her major. There were no opportunities for her to go on an archaeological dig or do research with her professor, and she knew she wanted that. And she said, what will it take to transfer? She finally persuaded her parents that it wasn't about best, although you could argue it was best because our archaeology department was far better, but it was really about the place that would be the right fit for her. She transferred, she came to BU, she graduated with honors, and she is now a PhD candidate at the University of Chicago. So I share that story with you because you really have to be true to yourself in this process and make sure that you're always keeping the focus on right fit. So majors matter. Even though your children are going to change their mind, I promise you, they will. If they've got a couple of areas of study they're thinking about, you want to make sure the colleges that are eventually on their list offer all of those majors. And more importantly, that when they change their mind, that college and university will allow them to do so. I went to college as a pre-med major. Apparently, a lot of students in the United States do that. Chemistry was my favorite course in high school. It was not my favorite course when I got to college. And so I had to figure out what I wanted to study. I tried on lots of courses for size. I took economics courses. I actually took an education course. I took a broadcast journalism course. I took English and philosophy and psychology because I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And that's one of the values of a liberal arts education. It allows you to explore and experiment. I wound up declaring a major in psychology and English, which if you had told me in high school that's what I was going to do, never would have believed it. But I needed to figure that out for myself. And it was clearly the right decision for me. I went on to do counseling psychology as my graduate degree, and it works perfectly for the kind of work that I do, helping young people in this transition from high school to college. So things all come together, but it didn't happen day one at the university. So allow that time for your children to explore. But what was important was where I went to university, I could change my mind. That is not true everywhere. So this is a very important question for parents in particular to be asking. There are some, I'll use my niece. I'm going to tell you another story because I think stories sometimes are better examples. My niece went to a public research university in the United States. Great university. She went there thinking she was going to study Italian. She had fallen in love with Italy. She wanted to learn the language. She wanted to learn all the history and culture. And so that's what she was doing. Well, in her sophomore year, she too changed her mind and decided that she wanted to study nursing. Thankfully, the university she was enrolled at had a nursing school. But guess what? She couldn't just say, I want to change my mind. She actually had to reapply to get to the nursing school, even though it was the same university. As it turns out, there were 3 spots in the nursing school, 3. She had a 3.8 GPA, and she did not get in. So guess what? She left. She transferred and went somewhere else. That makes me, it worked out in the end, but it made me very sad at the time because she loved her university. She was very engaged in the community, but she had to make a choice to leave because she wasn't able to access her major. So find out if your children change their mind, if they can move to another division of the university. It's not always easy to do, okay? Sports and activities, They may matter to some of you, they may not matter to others of you, that's fine, but you do want to get a sense of the culture. Is this a big-time football school where every Saturday that's all anyone does? Is it a campus with a lot of fraternities and sororities? Is that of interest to your child? Is it not? This is all part of what those activities and campus climate is about. Diversity I really talked about already. It's really about, is this campus global? Where are students from? Is it regional? Is it national? Is it global? So if those things matter to your child, you want to make sure that you understand them. I'm going to talk about cost in a little bit, but I'm going to mention outcomes. Does anyone know what I mean when I talk about outcomes? Absolutely, you're 100% correct. So as parents, you're making this investment, right? So you should expect that we can provide you with some evidence, some proof of how our students are being successful, what they're doing. Are they going to graduate school, and what percentage? Where are they going? Are they working? Are they employed? What's an average out-of-school salary? And in a variety of disciplines, because average salary for someone going into perhaps finance is very different than somebody who might be going to work at a newspaper. So we should be able to provide all that information. If they can't, I would be asking lots of questions. But that notion of outcomes is really, really important. So those are some of the things, and that's a lot. But that's why I mean this research is really, really important. And it's especially for juniors. They should be doing this kind of assessment right now. Now, you know, part of the question is, part of the question is, how do they do this research? Sorry, somehow I'm skipping something. My advice is they should set up an account right now with the College Board. Part of the website is something called Big Future. Big Future is a wonderful place for students to begin getting a baseline on what colleges and universities exist in the United States. And what's wonderful about this website is it's completely interactive, and it allows students to pick and choose different characteristics that they're looking for. So, you know, maybe your daughter is going to go in and say, I want to look at only research universities. I'm looking at the East Coast. I want costs that are, you know, $50,000 to $60,000. I want an international population of at least 20%. I'm just making this up, but she can literally plug those qualities in, and a list of schools will pop up, and she can begin to do her research on those institutions. And then she could start fresh with a whole different list. So Big Future is a really, really important tool. And I know I'm here, I'm part of a grant with the College Board, but I'm not plugging this because of the grant. It's because the tool is really robust and a really helpful place to begin. I'm assuming you ask students to do that.
Right. And you know what, we haven't sent out like a mass email on that or anything, but I can do that so you can get the information on how to access it and how to do it. So we'll send out an email.
Perfect, thank you. So the one thing on my list when I was talking about college characteristics that I said I'd come back to is competition for admission. That is another factor that you need to consider. If you look at the headlines of newspapers, certainly in the United States, but also around the world, you would assume that it's almost impossible to get into most colleges and universities in the United States, right? Because all they do is talk about how competitive it was to get into Harvard this year. They admitted 3% of their applicants. It was even more impossible to get into Stanford. They admitted 2% of their applicants. But the reality is that is not most institutions in the United States. In fact, most institutions in the United States, 66% of us admit at least 2/3 of our applications. So that's the reality check for all of you as parents. Now, it depends on where your children are applying for admission. Obviously, the more prestigious, more elite an institution is, the more selective they are. My institution, we admit a quarter of our applicants. And even that fraction, there are only about 18% of colleges and universities in the US that admit sort of 25% or less students. The vast majority admit over half. So I want you to keep that in mind as you're building your lists. So in terms of applying to college, there are a couple of different ways that your children can do this. I want to make sure everyone can see this. I feel like I'm blocking some of you. There are lots of different types of applications that you can use in the United States. And these are 5 of the most typical. And I'm going to start with number 1. It's called the Common Application. The Common Application is just as its name suggests. It is common. It is a shared application platform that about 800 colleges and universities in the United States use. And so whether you're applying to Boston University, the University of Southern California, Northwestern University, Washington University in St. Louis, or Tufts, we all accept the Common Application. This is fabulous news for your children. It means they go in, they complete a single application form, they list the colleges that they're applying to, and it will automatically populate 6, 7, 10 applications, whatever number of schools you're applying to. It is really easy. It beats the day when I was applying to college in the 70s, and I was typing each application for the schools I applied to. This is really a seamless and very user-friendly platform for your children. Now, understand that even with the Common Application, there are components of the application that are unique to each school. So they're called supplements. And so when you're applying for admission to Boston University, we're going to ask you a series of other questions and an additional essay. If you're applying to the University of Chicago, they're going to ask you some additional questions and have you write about 5 additional essays. So it's going to run the gamut, but the basic information will be the same. So the Common Application, I would say, is probably the most widely used application platform in the United States. Some institutions, although that number is getting very small, actually have their own application. Georgetown University is a perfect example. They only accept their own application. They're not on the Common App, they're not on anything else. So if you're applying to Georgetown, you use their application. So there are a few of us out there, but they want to be looking for that. The coalition application is a relatively new application model in the US. It was started only 3 years ago. It's a group of universities, both public and private. And these institutions represent a group of schools that are really committed to access and affordability. And so you may find that one of the schools that your child is considering is a member of the coalition. And if they wish to apply using the coalition app, they can. Many of the coalition application schools are also members of the Common App. So the question that inevitably comes up is, which application form should I use? Is there a preference? And I can promise you, I can reassure you, there is no preference. If a school accepts more than one application type, they view them equally. So it's really whatever application form your child would prefer to do. The universal application, much like the coalition and much like the Common Application, is also a shared platform. It's not as widely used, but I wanted you to be familiar with it because, you know, there are some well-known universities in the US that accept the universal app. Harvard does, for example. My institution does not. So you can begin to see what some of the differences are in these platforms. Lastly, the state system application. A lot of the public flagship universities and state systems in the US have their own application form. The UC system is a perfect example. If you're applying to UCLA, if you're applying to UC Santa Barbara, if you're applying to UC Berkeley, there is one application, I'm going to call it a platform because it's not really an application, that you use, and you can apply to 6, 7 of the UC and state college campuses, whatever you want to do. It's the only way to apply. Michigan does that as well, but Michigan also accepts the common application. So you can see there's a lot of overlap, and these will be decisions that your child will need to make about the kind of application they're going to use. So I want to take the remaining time that we have together, and maybe I'll stop here before I go on. I was trying to give you a sense of what the selection process is all about, the kind of work your child can be doing, especially as juniors and seniors, but even as they're sophomores and they're thinking about college. I want to segue now into the actual admissions selection process and how we approach it in the United States. But before I do that, I just want to see if there are any questions about selecting a college that you might have. Yes, sir.
Ranking, is there any data about how good the teachers are?
Well, so the question is about rankings, and is there any information available about the quality of teaching or the quality of instruction? You know, this is one of the debates that goes on about ranking, because the problem with a ranking is it's a number, right? It doesn't tell you anything about the quality, the experience, or the fit for a child, right? And so that gets to the quality of instruction. If you would ask the editors of U.S. News, they would tell you they try to get at that by the reputation. Reputation is part of the U.S. News ranking metric system. And how do they evaluate reputation? Well, they send surveys to people like me to fill out and ask me, what do I think of some of the other universities in my area? I don't know anything about other universities. I can't possibly evaluate their teaching, yet I'm asked to do that. And so are college presidents, and so are college counselors in high schools. College counselors probably have far more knowledge about different institutions than I do, but they're still not there. They're not on campus. They're not in the classroom. So that feels like it's flawed logic to me, so my bias is coming through there. But it is the problem with rankings, and that's the heart of it. It's numerical, it's metric, it's quantitative. But it doesn't guarantee that it's a place where your child will get the best possible education. It just can't do that. So how do you do that? I think you have to visit campuses, and I know that's a challenge for families that are living overseas. But if a student is on campus, they sit in on a class. They maybe spend the night with the student, and they ask about their professors. They go online. You know, there is this tool in America called Rate My Professor, and you can get qualitative research, qualitative comments, I should say, from students about their teaching. The other thing that goes on in the U.S., there's a study. It's a NSSE study. It's the National Survey of Student Engagement. And it's one of the ways we all assess the quality of education at our own institutions. Most of us try to publish the NSSE data, and it's real live student feedback about their experience in the classroom. So that could be a question that you ask. What are the results of your NSSE study? What are your students telling us about their teachers? So that's another suggestion that I would make to you. But it's the hardest thing to wrap your heads around when you're looking at institutions. Will faculty really engage with my child? Will they reach out to my child? Will my child have access to them? We all can tell you stories about how that happens on our campus, and believe me, it does. But I think a lot of the onus rests with the child, right? It's the difference between high school and college. Here you've got people, you know, the responsibility is on the shoulders of teachers and counselors and the leadership of the school to making sure your child feels included and that They're talking with them if something feels like it's going awry. When you get to college, the roles shift a little bit. And if students want something, they have to raise their hands. If they've got a question or a concern or are struggling, they have to go see their teacher or their advisor. So there's an accountability that shifts when students get to college campuses. And that's true whether it's large or small. Yep.
You tell us what are the most important factors selecting the university colleges in terms of the major? You already give us the examples of archaeology students or something, but for most of the Asian students, there's a stuff is how to select the majors. So speaking of the majors, what are the important factors to have the flexibility, or just how important to make a selection from under? Okay, I'm just asking that what are the important factors for selecting the undergraduate level of the major in terms of major. So because most of the Asian students are stumbled to select the majors, even though you just give us the example of archaeology students. So what are the important factors? Is it important to think about the flexibility to change, or is it really important to make a selection in the undergraduate level? That's my question.
So, selecting a major is actually a really hard decision. And if I can reassure you at all, of all the questions that your children are thinking about during this process, major is probably least important. That may surprise you, because they are going to change their mind. They might think they're pre-med like me. They might think they're engineering. They might think they're business. But they're 17 years old. And they're changing literally day by day. And you want them to change and grow and evolve, right? And even what they tell me on their application that they'd like to study, by the time they arrive on my campus as a first-year freshman, they're going to have 10 other ideas. So major should not drive the process. The beauty of higher education in the United States is there's a lot of breadth as well as depth, right? You get to develop this mastery of a subject, an area of expertise with your major, but you also get to dabble in lots of other courses, which is what liberal arts is all about. And it's very different from most education systems around the world. They're much narrower than what exists in the United States. Doesn't mean one's better than another, it's just different in the US. And so we want students who have this expertise in history, but we want them to be well written. We want them to have strong communication skills. We want them to be critical thinkers. We want them to be collaborative. We want them to be problem solvers. These skills are acquired when you take an English class, you take a statistics class, you take a history class, you take a lab science class. So the major will come, I promise you. For some students, it might happen first semester freshman year. For other students, it might not happen until the end of their sophomore year, and that's okay. Most universities and colleges in the US, you have 4 semesters before you have to declare your major. So what happens when you're looking for universities, but you're not sure what your major is? You know, one of the things that you should take a little comfort in is that universities have hundreds of majors. You know, my university has 250 majors. So the chances are, when you change your mind, we're going to have something else that your child wants to study. Colleges, you know, the number of majors are smaller. So especially if you have a child that's undecided, you know, that might move you in the direction of looking at universities because there will be more choices. But this is part of the balance that you have to try to figure out.
Let me give you my son's example.
Okay, here's the...
My son, let me give you my son's example. I see he's talented in the area of, you know, the computer, and he is very interested in making a movie.
Okay.
So, and actually, my major is architecture. So, as a
Your
son of
major is what?
architecture. So
Architecture.
I see a lot of talents in the architecture too. So I don't know how to give him the advice. So, because you say about the humanities, but this is more like scientific or the industrial areas.
Yeah, so, you know, your son, again, remember, he's not fully formed yet. You know, I think we can say that. You know, he's got to figure out what he wants to do, and he might not know very much about filmmaking right now, but it's something he really enjoys. You know, maybe in part he should run with that. But maybe along the way, he's also going to realize that he likes computer science. Is there a way to put those things together? If you were applying to my university, I would say you betcha. But that may not be true at other places. So, you know, I guess what I would say, I know you want like a definitive answer, but there is no definitive answer about the major right now. There just isn't. You know, it's going to take some time for your children to figure out exactly what they want to study. But what's important is that you're encouraging them to do that exploration, to follow their hearts, trust their guts, because they know what they like. And they'll take some courses and they'll figure out if that's the direction they want to go. You have to trust me that it works out. It does. But they don't have to have all the answers right now. They can't possibly have them all. So, you know, you have to allow for some uncertainty in this process.
Back to my original question. So how to choose the undergrad level?
You take courses. I mean, that's what students do. I mean, to choose your major, when you're undecided, you take a range of courses. I go back to my example. After chemistry, I realized wasn't a fit. I took psychology, I took communications, I took arts, I took economics. It was a little bit of a smorgasbord approach until I figured out exactly what I wanted to do. And guess what? It was fine. I graduated in 4 years. It was not a hurdle. You know, you go back to my maze example, there are going to be some twists and turns along the way, and it's okay. I know it's very different, especially from university systems in Asia and Europe that are really narrow, but in the United States, it is not. And so you can do that and still be successful and finish your degree. So it will work. Yes, ma'am.
At a lot of schools in the U.S., you have to take general ed courses. So there's a required number of courses in a number of different disciplines that they have to take. And that's when they get exposed to the different fields and maybe choose what major they like.
Yep. That is correct. That's absolutely correct. So I see there's some other hands, but I'm also conscious of time. I do want to talk about the admissions process because I think that's one of the primary drivers of everyone being here. I will try to move through this and we can go back to some questions if we have time. So the admissions process, much like the colleges and universities in the US, is very different than other parts of the world. In a lot of places around the world, to go to university, you take an external exam, you get a score, and then you are admitted to XYZ college or university, right? That is not true in the United States. At many institutions, we approach admissions and implement this process. Our approach is called holistic admissions. Have you all heard that term before? Some have, some haven't. So holistic admissions or comprehensive review, those terms are used interchangeably, is really an approach to evaluating applicants that is holistic. In other words, the whole student. We are looking at every part of their life and really building this profile of who that young person is. We're evaluating and assessing their academic performance by reviewing their transcript. We're looking at grades. We're looking at the kinds of courses they've taken. We're looking at the level of those courses. In other words, how rigorous are they? We're looking at trends in their academic record. We're looking at strengths. Maybe a student's better at math and science than they are in English and history. So we can actually learn a lot from a high school transcript. We go over that one document with a fine-tooth comb. Really, really important information. But it doesn't end there. We then rely on teachers to share their comments, feedback, insights about who this young person is. They tell us about their work ethic, their motivation for study. They talk about whether they participate and ask questions in class. They talk about their willingness to support and assist their classmates on projects. Is this a student that goes the extra mile and always does additional work in the classroom? So they're really trying to help us understand what kind of academic citizen this young person is. So they give us insights because they're with students every day. We are not. So letters of recommendation are very, very powerful. We also look at how students spend their time in and out of the classroom, right? Some of them may play sports. Other students might play an instrument in the orchestra. They might do some community service here in Chiang Mai. A student might be in Model UN. But we want to understand the kinds of things that make them happy, the kinds of things that bring a smile to their face, the things that add value and meaning to their lives. And that's through the activities. And by the way, this doesn't mean a resume that's 4 pages long. More is not necessarily better. When I see a student with a resume that's 4 pages, that's longer than mine, there's something wrong with that, right? We really want to see students select activities that they enjoy, and they're doing them because it's important to them, not because somebody else says they should do it. We also look at written statements, personal statements, or essays. It's an opportunity for a student to share with us a little bit about who they are. Essays are read, they're read carefully. It's a tremendous opportunity for a student to tell us their story. And then, of course, there's the standardized testing. Many universities and colleges, especially selective universities, require standardized testing. There is a trend in the US, you've probably heard, for some schools to be test optional. That means they do not require the SAT or the ACT. But most selective colleges are not on that list. So my guess is the schools and colleges that your children are thinking about are places that will require either the SAT or the ACT. We have no preference. Students can choose to take one or the other. Some students take both. It's entirely up to your child, but we will accept either. No preference. We also look at other considerations. Legacy. You know, if your child is applying to your university, they're a legacy, right? It's your alma mater. Colleges and universities might consider that as one more piece of their application. We might look at leadership, special skills. You know, you always hear the adage about, oh, that student got in because he plays the oboe and they needed an oboe player in their orchestra. Well, it's a story, but in fact, there's some truth to that story because sometimes we do need that oboe player. So we're really trying to craft and build this class of an eclectic and diverse group of young people, all of whom we believe will be successful at our institution. Academics matter, and they are the driver of all admissions decisions. You know, students believe, and this is a myth I have to debunk, you know, oh, the class president will get in anywhere they want to go because they're class president. It's just not true. You know, we have to feel confident that a student will thrive on our campus. So academics matter. So all of this is to say, we're really, think of it as putting together a puzzle. That's exactly what we're doing. We're learning a little bit about academics. We're hearing what the teachers have to say about the student. We're looking at what the student has to say about him or herself. And we're putting this puzzle together to figure out if Johnny or Susie or Frankie or John will be a good fit at our institution. So these are the application factors. I really went through them already. I want to go back to standardized tests. and I want to mention the TOEFL. So even though your children, if your children are not U.S. passport holders, and even though they're at a school like this, they're in an English-speaking curriculum, they're exposed to advanced placement courses, if English is not their first language, they will still be expected to take a TOEFL. So you want to be preparing for that as one of the standardized requirements for admission. Unlike the SAT or ACT, most of us do not have minimum requirements. You know, we give a range of test scores that are benchmarks that you can use when applying for admission. So our mid 50% at BU is 1400 to 1510. Most of the students we admitted had test scores in that range. That's a pretty high range, but that is a range, it's not a cutoff. The TOEFL, on the other hand, we give minimums, and most schools do. You have to meet or exceed the minimum on the TOEFL to be considered for admission. Yes, sir?
All right, you said a number, 1,400 to 1,500 range on what?
For students that were offered admission to my university.
What's that score? What's that number representing?
It's the it's the SAT.
1,400, 1,500? That's very high.
Yes, yeah. That's the new SAT, yeah. So that figure I just gave to you as an example is what most colleges and universities report. They give you this mid 50% range, so half their class had test scores between point A and point B. And so you should, that's part of the research, so that you can benchmark your child against what is typical at universities. But remember, that's just the mid 50%. Means a quarter had scores higher than that, but it means a quarter of the students had scores lower than that. So it just gives you, you know, a framework from which to be working when you think about admissions. So let me stop there about the admissions process. I know we're at our time. I don't know. I mean, I can stay if people can stay. I want to take questions about admissions, or we can move right into financial aid. What would you all like me to do? Financial aid? Financial aid? Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about paying for college. So much like the wide variety of colleges and universities that exist in the United States, the reality is that the tuition cost, the cost of attendance, also varies pretty widely in the U.S. Selective private universities are typically in the $70,000 to $80,000 per year, U.S. dollars. That's not unusual. So that's what I mean when I say there's an extraordinary investment. There are private colleges in the U.S. that are $30,000 a year U.S., and there, of course, are the public universities. So these are the state system colleges and universities where the costs can be significantly less. They could be $7,000 to $10,000 a year for tuition, but of course there's room and board and fees, and that often adds another $20,000. But still, a public university could be $30,000. If you are not a U.S. passport holder, you're going to pay the out-of-state tuition at those institutions. That's going to be $70,000. If you are a U.S. passport holder and your residence is California, you get to pay the in-state tuition at the University of California system. So those costs are going to vary, but only for public universities, okay? So you have to be prepared that there is a tremendous investment when you think about colleges and universities. The best advice that I can give to all of you is you want to find out what our policies are regarding international students. Some universities and colleges provide financial assistance for non-U.S. passport holders. Some do not. And it is a pretty mixed bag, honestly. When we do research and we look at families that are coming from overseas that are not U.S. citizens, 80% of the students are funding their own education. So I think that gives you a really good glimpse of whether or not any kind of financial aid, whether it's need-based or merit, will be available for you if you're not a U.S. citizen. So that's a little bit of a reality check. So in terms of the kind of aid that's available in the U.S., it really falls into two categories, need-based and merit. So I'm going to start with merit because it's a little bit more straightforward. Merit is just what the word says. It's meritorious, and it is gift money. It is always based on academic merit, and students compete for scholarships, whatever the dollar value might be, for a scholarship at that institution. Students usually have to apply. They usually have to do something additional. At my university, they have to write another essay, but you know, that essay is worth it because they're considered for a full tuition scholarship. It's worth $250,000 US right now. So writing an extra essay, you want your child to do that, right? But you have to be willing to take those additional steps. Not every college and university in the US offers merit. The Ivy League institutions, for example, do not offer merit money. It's all need-based. So when you're researching, you want to find out what the policies are regarding merit. Merit scholarships, as a rule of thumb, are available to all students, regardless of nationality. So that should be good news. Merit scholarships will vary widely in dollar amount. Some can be as high as full tuition, some might be half tuition, some might be $5,000 or $10,000 a year. But nonetheless, that is money that will help reduce the overall cost of attendance. So I think, especially if you have a child that's doing well academically and you feel like they can compete in a merit scholarship competition, I would strongly encourage them to do as much as they can to apply for those merit scholarships that are out there. In terms of need-based financial aid is just what it sounds like. You as a family must have demonstrated need in order to receive financial assistance from the institution. In other words, it must be demonstrated through applications that you're unable to afford the cost of attendance. Applying for need-based financial aid is hard, it is complicated, it is arduous. I mean, I have to be completely honest with you. I remember when my father was doing it, I was one of 4. He hated this process desperately. But believe me, in 1 year when they had 3 of us in college, he was really glad he did it. So you do have to go through those steps. Universities or colleges that give financial aid to all students, regardless of citizenship, all of you will be expected to apply for financial aid, okay? For international families, there is often a separate form that you will need to complete. You cannot complete the FAFSA, okay? The FAFSA is the federal financial aid form for US citizens. So there's often another form that's institution specific that you will need to complete in order to be considered for need-based financial aid. For US parents, you will need to complete usually the FAFSA, so that free application for federal student aid, as well as the CSS profile. This is the College Scholarship Service profile. Most private universities are going to ask that you do both. Public universities, the FAFSA only. But CSS profile will be required at private universities. And as I mentioned, some institutions will have their own financial aid application, especially for international families. Okay, so keep that in mind. What does a financial aid award look like? Well, it depends. It depends on the school, depends on what you've applied for, but typically a financial aid award will have several different components. It will have the gift aid. That's the most important, right? That's the money we are giving to you and your family for your child to attend. This is not money you pay back. It is not a loan. It is outright gift. That amount could be $5,000, it could be $60,000. It really varies on the institution and your demonstrated need. So gift money is where we begin, and it's typically called grant. Another component of an aid award in the US would be something we call work study. Work study is a federally funded program in the United States. It is only for US citizens. And this is a program that allows students to work while they're on our campus. And they will work 7 to 10 hours a week. They'll be paid. So this amount might be $4,000 or $5,000 a year, but it's a way for a student to earn some money, have pocket money to buy pizza on Friday night with their friends, but have a job while they're on campus. It's actually a fabulous program. When we look nationally at data, students who are on work study and balancing that job with their academics have the highest GPAs. So working does not take away from the positive experience that students will have in the classroom. Yep. Yes. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's so much flexibility with work-study schedules. When midterms roll around, our students email us all the time and say, oh, can't come in this week, and we're fine with that. So we are very much going to work with students. I am also a fan of work-study. I think it's fabulous. Another part would be the merit scholarship. We talked about that already. That might be part of a financial aid award. Someone who's getting need-based aid could also get merit, so they're not mutually exclusive necessarily. And then there's also loans. There are student loans and there are parent loans. Families can decide whether or not they're going to take a loan in order to cover the cost of education. Those are personal, family, financial decisions, but it is another way that families fund their higher education in the United States. The final thing I just want to say, and I know this has been a quick overview, deadlines matter. Actually, I should say deadlines matter for this entire process. When students apply for admission, if our application deadline is January 1, it's January 1. It does not mean January 2. Most of us shut down our application portals and you cannot apply. So students have to pay attention to deadlines, and then families need to really pay attention to deadlines about financial aid. Our financial aid deadline, for example, is February 1. We expect the FAFSA and the profile to be completed and submitted online by February 1. If a family submits it on February 3rd, they're late. Will we accept it? Yes. But will they be at the bottom of the queue in terms of being considered for financial aid? They will. And it will definitely disadvantage them. So you do not want to be late when it comes to financial aid. Yes?
Two questions. Is this happening during the junior year of high school or the senior year of high school?
So financial aid you do in the senior year.
Second question, do you get accepted before financial aid or do you do both at the same time?
You do them? That's actually a really good question. Because every April, I wind up taking a phone call, usually from a parent, who is completely mystified because their child was offered admission to my university, but there are people in their neighborhood that are saying they got financial aid, but they didn't, because the father, or the parent, I'll say, thought you applied for financial aid after you found out where you're admitted, and that is not the case. You are applying for admission and financial aid simultaneously. When we announce our admission decisions in the spring, we announce both admission and financial aid at the same time. So it's really, really important that you're doing all of those things in a coordinated effort. This may not be something that you all are aware of, but last year we put a new process in place in the United States. It's called PPY, prior year. I know that doesn't really mean anything to anyone, but it has simplified the financial aid process in the US. Because it used to be that we needed to wait for your income tax information, which of course you get in late January, And then you have financial aid deadlines that are February 1, and it became a time crunch for people to get everything in. Well, that's no longer true. Students can begin filling out their financial aid, FAFSA, and profile usually around the 1st of October, and you can use the previous year's, hence PPY, tax information to apply for financial aid. And that's what colleges and universities will do, because there's a certain assumption that your finances are probably not shifting tremendously year to year. So this has been a huge boon for families. I think it's alleviated a lot of pressure, a lot of the time crunch, and it gives families more time to complete a thoughtful and thorough financial aid application. So it's been a win as far as we're concerned. Okay? Yes?
With financial aid, is that something that needs to be updated every year with the college? So when you get the initial acceptance of different, is that just for 1 year that you have to reapply every year?
So this is also a really good question. Do I need to reapply for financial aid every year? The answer is it depends. So my university, as an example, when we admit students as freshmen, we make a commitment to that aid award for 4 years. So as a family, you can plan. You do not have to reapply. It is based on what you've told us in the senior year of high school. You can appeal your financial aid if your circumstances change. Let's say both parents are working, one parent stops working, obviously your income has changed. You can say to us, I'd like to be reconsidered, because hopefully you'll be eligible for more money. But as a rule of thumb, there are lots of institutions now that are making a commitment for 4 years, which is great for families. Public universities that are relying especially on the FAFSA only, you should expect that you will be completing that every single year. And there are some private universities that have not moved to the model that we're on. So it really does vary pretty widely. Other things that, yes? That's right. Yep. That is correct. Yes, you do. Yep. Everything's easier. Technology has made a huge difference, both in admissions and financial aid, for sure. Are there other questions? I know, Erin, when we were talking, one of the things, and I think I kept it here. No, maybe I didn't. One of the things that we had talked about maybe was talking about some of the myths of the college admissions process. Sorry, I need my glasses. I'm good. So I'm happy to take questions. We can wrap up, but I also have this slide on myths. Yes?
Is it true that if you choose like some major that make you easier to get it?
Ah, that's one of the myths you anticipated. Very good. So the question is it true that in fact there are some departments or some divisions within universities where the competition for admission might be less? Yeah. It's a hard question to answer. So I am going to say it might be true in some places, but it's not true in all places. I will give you an example. So students ask me this question all the time. At my university, the answer would be absolutely not. But you know, somebody will come up to me and say, you know, I think I'm going to apply to your school of education, because it's often schools of education that are perceived to be less selective. I really want to study economics, but I'm going to apply to education because I'm eventually going to change my mind. And I say, don't do that, because the competition for admission in our School of Education is just as keen as it is in our College of Arts and Sciences. I will be very clear and very transparent with families. Is that always true at all universities? It's not. I think the difference is less about competition and more about preparation. So, for example, somebody that wants to study engineering, or they believe they want to study engineering, but the highest level math they had in high school was pre-calculus, and they didn't take physics. I guarantee you, it doesn't matter what engineering college you're applying to in the US, you will not get in. You don't want somebody building the bridges that you're driving over that hasn't had physics. You don't, right? You just don't. And so if a student doesn't have the coursework, the foundation and the preparation in high school, they're not going to get into engineering. They're just not. So that's where the difference in admissions comes into play, is normally for very specialized schools that have course requirements. And it's not about one division being less selective than another. Students should apply to the college in which they want to study. That is my advice. Don't try to strategize. Don't try to outthink us. Don't try to outguess us. Study what you want to study. Okay?
So, sorry, I'd like one more question about like pre-professional, like pre-engineering. Sorry, pre-engineering, like, pre-professional things, pre-med, pre-education, pre-business, something like that. But some university offer like, you can go to like art and science department instead of pre-business.
Yep.
Which is it like easier?
So the question is really about these pre-professions. What do they mean? And so pre-professional is a pathway. It is a track. It is not a major. Every university and college allows students to be pre-professional. They think they're going to law school. They think they're going to medical school. They think they're going to get an MBA. Yeah. That's fine. Their advisors can help them select courses that will ensure that they've got the preparation to apply to those schools, but they're not majors. You might say to your friends, I'm pre-med because I know I'm applying to med school, but I'm going to major in biology, or I'm going to major in English. You can. So pre-professional anything is not a major. You don't apply to pre-professional things. It's just a pathway. It's a series of courses that a student takes, okay? So think of it as something you do along with a major. Every student has to have a major to graduate from college, okay?
Okay, thank you.
You guys have had great questions. I appreciate it. I know we're about 25 minutes over the time that was allotted, but hopefully this was helpful to all of you. It's set the foundation for what you're going to be working on with your children for the next couple of years. It really is an exciting time. Your children will need lots of support, lots of encouragement. They will be very busy with this process, but I'm confident that they can do it, and at the end of the day, the process really works. People like me care about young people. We want them to thrive. We want them to do well. We want them to become better versions of themselves under our care. And we really want to put together these classes where students will do the best that they possibly can. They'll thrive and they graduate. So trust that it's a thoughtful process. It's a fair process. It is a hard process, but at the end of the day, it really works. So I wish you all the best of luck. I'm certainly here to take individual questions if you like. Thank you for spending the morning with me, and good luck and have a great day. Thank you. Hi. Hi. I'm Kelly.
My family applied the green card.
Oh, okay.
Just my mom is U.S. citizen.
Okay.
And I'm not.
Okay.
It's 10 years now, and we expect to get the end of the year.
Yeah.
My daughter, Amy, she's
Yeah.
in 11th grade.
Okay.